10 overdoses, 10 careers, 10 lives, cut tragically short. These weren't musicians on the fringes. They were arena fillers, chart toppers, icons who changed the sound of a generation. At the absolute peak of their power, the one thing they couldn't outrun wasn't the fame, the pressure, or the spotlight. It was what they turned to when all of that became too much.
Oh, honey, like you, the only man I ever wanted and I ever needed.
If you've ever really heard Janis Joplin sing, you know there's something uncomfortable about it. Too raw. Too real. She wasn't performing emotions, and she was bleeding them out every night. Growing up the outcast in Port Arthur, Texas, she carried every bit of that rejection into her voice. By Woodstock in '69, she was one of the most electric human beings alive. But the heroin was taking over. The needle gave her something the crowd couldn't. A moment of quiet in a head that never shut up. October 1970, she was in the studio finishing Pearl, her best work. The album that would have made her untouchable. On the 4th, she didn't show up to the session. Found alone in her hotel room. 27 years old. Pearl came out and it's brilliant. But every time I hear it, I think, what else was she capable of? We never got to find out. Be honest, where do you even start with Hendrix? He didn't just change guitar playing, he changed what sound itself could do. He was genuinely hearing things the rest of us hadn't caught up to yet. 4 years in the spotlight. 4 years. And guitarists are still trying to decode what he left behind. That's genuinely insane when you think about it. By 1970, he was running on empty. Brutal touring, relentless industry pressure, barbiturates, and alcohol just to get through it. He talked about wanting to slow down, go somewhere new musically. September 18th, 1970, London. He mixed barbiturates with wine and went to sleep. 27 years old. What haunts me is that his final recordings suggest he was on the verge of something completely new. Some direction nobody had heard yet. That's the version of Jimmy we never got. And that might be the real tragedy. Sid Vicious couldn't really play bass, and I say that with full respect because what he actually was had nothing to do with musicianship. He was a human hand grenade. Malcolm McLaren put him in the Sex Pistols because he looked like the end of the world. And for one absolutely feral year, that was more than enough. But the chaos wasn't an act. His relationship with Nancy Spungen was a full tailspin. Two people deep in heroin, feeding each other's worst instincts. October 1978, Nancy was found dead in their hotel room. Sid was charged with murder, always denied it. It was never proven. Out on bail in February 1979, he shot up heroin. His own mother got for him and died that night. 21 years old. Punk was about burning everything down, but nobody actually expected Sid to burn himself down with it.
Who cares? Come on, everybody!
This one's hard to talk about because Layne Staley didn't die suddenly. He disappeared slowly over years, right in front of everyone who loved him. At his peak with Alice in Chains, he was one of the best vocalists in the world. Full stop. And he knew exactly what the heroin was doing to him. Songs like Down in a Hole weren't metaphors. They were dispatches from inside the addiction in real time. By the mid-90s, the band had stopped. Layne barely left his Seattle apartment, turned visitors away. His weight collapsed. His last public appearance was 1996. 6 years of silence. April 5th, 2002. 8 years to the day after Cobain died. They found him. He'd been dead 2 weeks. 86 pounds. 34 years old. The tragedy isn't just the death. The addiction had already taken him piece by piece long before the end. That's the part that breaks you. Go back and listen to Weiland now and ask yourself how we didn't appreciate him more at the time. That voice was genuinely one of a kind. He could whisper something menacing and then explode in the same breath, inhabiting a song rather than just singing it. Stone Temple Pilots were seriously underrated, and Weiland was the reason. But his whole career was this exhausting cycle of brilliance and collapse. Rehab, comeback, arrested, fired. Velvet Revolver. Back to STP. Fired again. He kept getting up, which says something about the man. But the cocaine, alcohol, whatever else, it kept winning. December 2015, his tour bus sat in a Minnesota lot, and he never came out. 48 years old. His ex-wife put out a statement asking people not to romanticize it, because behind the rock mythology was a dad, a person. The myth does a disservice to the actual human being.
Show me the way to the...
Slightly controversial take, I think. Morrison wanted to be a poet more than he ever wanted to be a rock star. The Doors were the vehicle, but what he was really after was something literary, timeless. And when he was on, he got pretty close. The end. Riders on the Storm.
The next whiskey bar. Tell ya we must die. Tell ya we must die.
There's genuine craft in that writing. He wasn't just posturing, but by 1970, it had gotten ugly. Drinking completely out of control, stumbling through shows, obscenity charges from a Miami concert hanging over him. He moved to Paris to write, to escape all of it. July 3rd, 1971, found dead in his bathtub. 27 years old. No autopsy. Official cause was heart failure, though the full story's never been resolved, which honestly fits him perfectly. Murky and unfinished, just like the myth he spent his whole life building. The alcohol and drugs were killing him either way. Paris just happened to be where they caught up.
No one remembers your name when you're strange.
We have never had another drummer like Keith Moon, and we never will. He didn't play the kit, and he attacked it, like someone personally furious at every single drum in the room, and somehow it was always exactly right. The Who without Moon isn't a lesser version of The Who. It's a completely different band. Off stage, he was the same energy. Incredible to watch. Quietly catastrophic to actually live as. The drinking got worse through the 70s. He was unreliable. His health was deteriorating, and everyone around him was worried. In 1978, his doctor prescribed Hemorrhagic to manage alcohol withdrawal. September 7th, he watched a film, took his pills, went to sleep, never woke up. 32 years old. The medication meant to save him is what killed him. The Who carried on, but Townshend has said it himself. There was no replacing Moon. There was just learning to exist without him.
What happens with your goldfish?
The goldfish? Well, I mean, you know, even the best drummers get hungry.
September 25th, 1980. Led Zeppelin gather at Page's Place in Windsor to start rehearsals for a North American tour. Bonham had been drinking heavily all day before he even arrived. 40 measures of vodka, the coroner estimated. His bandmates helped him to bed that evening. He never woke up, and with him, Led Zeppelin ended too. Immediately and permanently. The best hands in rock, full stop. That opening to When the Levee Breaks Alone is enough to settle any argument. Behind it all was a man genuinely anxious about the scale of the fame, using alcohol to cope for years, and it had been escalating. When he died, the band didn't deliberate. No replacement, no continuation, just a statement and silence. Because Bonham wasn't the drummer for Led Zeppelin. He was half of what made them what they were.
Back in 1955, man didn't know about a rock and roll show.
Bon Scott wasn't supposed to be the singer of AC/DC. He was a last-minute call-up, and within 30 seconds of hearing him, you understood why it was always going to be him. Rough, leering, full of swagger, the perfect match for the Young Brothers guitars. He made AC/DC feel genuinely dangerous because with Bon, it kind of was real. He lived exactly the way he sang every single day.
Drums and guitar. Oh, let me rock.
February 18th, 1980, London. A heavy night of drinking, then found unconscious in a friend's car the next morning. Acute alcohol poisoning. 33 years old. The band nearly quit entirely. Instead, they found Brian Johnson, wrote Back in Black, and dedicated the whole thing to Bon. One of the best-selling albums in history. Beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure. Because it only exists because he was gone. Every time you hear that opening bell, just remember who it's actually for.
Although I wasn't there.
No death in rock hit a generation the way Cobain's did. Because it wasn't just losing a musician, it was losing the person who'd somehow articulated exactly how a lot of people felt without even trying to. Nevermind didn't sound like anything else. He wasn't chasing fame. He was running from something. And the music he made, in that state, was unlike anything before or since. The fame found him anyway, and it destroyed him. Suffocating, alienating, completely at odds with who he actually was. Heroin became the way he coped with all of it. March 1994, he overdosed in Rome. April 8th, 1994, an electrician found him at his Seattle home. 27 years old. Nirvana ended immediately, completely. No continuation. 30 years later, the absence still feels active. Like there's a space in music where he should be, and nothing has ever grown in to fill it. 10 musicians, 10 stories that end the same way but feel completely different. What they shared was the music and the fact that it was never finished. So next time you put on one of these records, really listen. You're hearing everything they managed to get out before the darkness won.